It is the most secretive bank on earth, the one bank that rules all central banks, and almost no one alive can even name it. Before we step inside that tower, if you want the real story behind the money and the men who move the world, subscribe to Phineas. This is where the empires that rule everything finally get pulled into the light. Every 2 months, without a headline, without a press conference, the most powerful monetary figures alive board private jets and disappear into one small Swiss city. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, the president of the European Central Bank, the governor of the Bank of England, the head of the People's Bank of China. Black cars carry them through a quiet gate, and they vanish behind the walls of a single cylindrical tower rising over the old streets of Basel. Inside those walls, they answer to no government. They pay no taxes. And no Swiss police officer on earth is permitted to search them. This is the Bank for International Settlements. And this is the untold story of how it learned to sit above nations. Here is what has to be understood before we go any further. This is the one institution that walks into every crisis the modern world has ever produced: reparations, world war, an execution order, the crashes that swallow everyone else, and walks out the other side bigger, richer, and more untouchable than before. Every storm that levels the giants around it leaves this tower standing. By the end, the machinery will stand fully exposed. Why does a bank that serves no public, that holds no ordinary customer, that no outsider can ever walk in and open an account with, need a fortress of legal immunity no government on earth can breach? Hold that question. The answer is the reason it still stands today. To find it, we go back. It is the year 1930. Europe is still bleeding from the last war. The guns fell silent more than a decade ago, but the wound has not closed, because the victors are still fighting over the corpse. Germany has been broken and saddled with reparations so vast they can never truly be paid, and the great powers are circling, arguing over how to squeeze gold out of a country that has none left to give. Out of that ugly arithmetic comes a plan. The Young Plan, named for the American who drafted it, a scheme to finally organize the flow of German reparations. And buried inside it, almost as a footnote, is something new. Something that has never existed before. A bank whose only customers are other central banks. It rises in Basel, Switzerland, a quiet, orderly city on the Rhine where 3 borders meet. Its architects are not politicians. They are central bankers, men like Montague Norman, the enigmatic governor of the Bank of England, with his pointed beard and his wide-brimmed hat and his deep distrust of the public. And across the table, Hjalmar Schacht, the cold, brilliant head of the German Reichsbank, the man tasked with rebuilding the finances of a humiliated nation, rivals on the surface, partners underneath. Together, they build the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, and from its very first day, they hand it something no ordinary bank has ever been given: full legal immunity. A private island of law carved right into the heart of Switzerland, beyond the reach of any government, Swiss or otherwise. Its offices cannot be entered. Its gold cannot be seized. Its books cannot be opened by any court. The bank exists on Swiss soil, but the ordinary laws of that soil stop at its door. So what does a bank like this actually do? Strip away the mystery, and the mechanism is almost simple. Think of it as a members-only clearinghouse, a private settling room for the people who print the world's money. Every nation's central bank keeps an account inside. When one owes another, they don't ship crates of bullion across a wartime ocean. They simply move it on the books, inside the tower, from one account to the next, The money printers of the planet settle their debts with each other in a single room and move gold between them without a single politician watching. Picture it. Gold sliding quietly from one nation's account to another in the dim light of a Swiss vault, and not one elected official anywhere on Earth allowed to ask why. And here is the thing that keeps surfacing, the thing this whole story keeps circling back to. Why is it always the same handful of institutions that survive every crash, while entire nations crumble around them? The BIS is only one case of it. There is a structure underneath, a pattern to how power positions itself, hoards its leverage, and stays untouchable when everyone else is panicking. That pattern is exactly what the Empire Code lays out. It breaks down the 6 recurring patterns that sit beneath nearly every great fortune that outlives the storm. The same machinery you are watching this tower use right now. Instead of admiring wealth from the outside, you learn to read the structure underneath it. How money, opportunity, and power actually flow, and why most people never see it. Scan the code on screen, or follow the link in the description. Because once you can see the code, you cannot unsee it. Now all of this, the immunity, the invisibility, the vault no outsider can enter, is sold to the world as a tool for peace. A neutral machine to help a shattered continent rebuild. And on paper, it is. But understand what has really been created here. A room no one can look inside is also a room where anything can happen. A vault no court can open is a vault that can hold anything. The very secrecy built to heal Europe is a secrecy that answers to no conscience but its own. And it is about to be tested by the one thing no one in Basel wants to say out loud. But the gold that is about to arrive at the tower's vaults is not the gold of peace. In less than a decade, war will return to Europe. And into this immune, invisible Swiss bank will flow bullion torn from the central banks of nations that no longer exist, and, in the darkest accounts, from the dead themselves. It is the year 1939, and the gold sliding into the vaults beneath the Basel Tower no longer belongs to the living. Across Europe, armies are on the march. Borders vanish overnight. And one by one, the central banks of conquered nations are emptied. Their reserves loaded onto trains, hauled west, and melted into fresh bars stamped with the eagle and the swastika. Some of it comes from national vaults. Some of it, in the darkest accounts, is prized from the mouths and the fingers of the dead. All of it needs a home. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no government is allowed to look. And there is exactly one place on Earth engineered for that purpose. Now look at the man who keeps the doors open. His name is Thomas McKittrick, an American banker, and through the entire war he serves as president of the Bank for International Settlements. Think about what that means. His own country is fighting Nazi Germany to the death, and McKittrick sits in a boardroom where German and Allied central bankers share the same table, settle the same accounts, and shake the same hands across the very line their nations are dying on. While the world burns, the tower keeps its appointments. The paperwork is always in order. To reach his bank, McKittrick travels across a Europe at war, moving through blockades and checkpoints with papers that open every border. A banker granted safe passage by both sides, because both sides still need the tower to keep the books. And the paperwork is the trick. Because the mechanism here is almost unbearably simple. The Reichsbank sends gold. The Bank for International Settlements accepts it, credits the account, and settles the balance. And it never once asks the only question that matters. Where did this gold come from? It is like a private safe deposit box with no name on the door, one that takes any deposit from any hand and promises never to ask how it was earned. That is not a flaw in the system. That is the service. The immunity granted at its birth, the private island of law no Swiss policeman may enter, is now doing exactly what immunity does. It makes the plunder invisible. And that gold is not clean. Years later, the world will learn the truth. That among the bars the tower took in were reserves looted from the central banks of occupied nations, Belgium, the Netherlands, and others, nations erased from the map, their national savings carried off and quietly recycled through Basel. And in the most damning accounts, some of that metal was never bank gold at all. It was melted from wedding rings, from spectacles, from the possessions of the murdered. Inside the tower, the men tell themselves a story. They are neutral. They are merely technical. They are simply settling debts between institutions, as they have always done, keeping the machinery of international finance alive for the peace that will surely come. They are not choosing a side. They are only keeping the books. And here is the question that will haunt the tower for 80 years. Can a bank be neutral when it is quietly counting the plunder of a genocide? The tower's answer is silence. The gold moves in the dark, as it always has, without a single politician watching. The bank built to heal Europe has become the safest hiding place its executioners will ever find. It is laundering the loot of the men burning the continent down and calling it bookkeeping. But the war does not last forever. And when the killing finally stops, the reckoning comes for Basel. It is the year 1944. In a grand hotel at the foot of the White Mountains in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, the victors gather to build the entire financial architecture of the post-war world, the system of exchange rates, the International Monetary Fund, the framework that will govern money for the next half-century. And as they draw the blueprint of the future, they turn and look at the tower that spent the war counting Nazi gold. Surely, when the war ends, such a bank cannot be allowed to survive. The men at Bretton Woods think exactly that. They are about to be proven wrong. The anger in that conference hall is real, and it has a leader. The Norwegian delegation, speaking for a nation that had been invaded, occupied, and stripped, rises and forces the issue onto the floor. Norway demands that the Bank for International Settlements be destroyed, not reformed, not restructured, destroyed. And the room agrees. The most powerful economists on earth, the architects of the new world of money, vote, and they pass a formal resolution calling for the liquidation of the Bank for International Settlements at the earliest possible moment. Understand the weight of that moment. The tower that was designed to sit above nations has just been condemned by the nations themselves, in the open, on the record. Its name is spoken in that hall as something shameful. Its accounts are a crime scene. Its death is no longer a threat. It is an order, signed by the very men now building the future of global finance. And so it is signed. An official resolution, passed at Bretton Woods, ordering the complete liquidation of the Bank for International Settlements. The most powerful economists on earth have sentenced the tower to death. The bank that sits above nations has just been told, by the nations themselves, that it must cease to exist. And yet, it does not die. Because the most dangerous banks are never killed in the open. They are not dragged into the light and executed in front of the world. Their death sentences are handed down loudly, in grand halls, before cameras and delegates. And then, somewhere far quieter, in a room the storms are never allowed to enter, those sentences simply disappear. The order to destroy the Bank for International Settlements is about to vanish. As quietly as the gold once did. It does not die. Because in the quiet weeks after Bretton Woods, something strange happens, which is to say, Nothing happens at all. The resolution is passed, the order is signed, and then it is buried. The liquidation is never executed. No trustee arrives in Basel to seize the vaults. No auditor unlocks the books. The death sentence, handed down by the most powerful economists on earth, simply dissolves into the paperwork of a war-exhausted world. And within a few short years, the same disgraced tower is quietly welcomed back into the heart of the new financial order, its immunity fully intact, as if the condemnation had never been spoken at all. This is the moment. This is the first hard proof of the survival thesis that will define everything that comes after. The bank cannot be killed. Not because it is loved. Not because it is innocent. Everyone in that room knows exactly what passed through Basel during the war. It cannot be killed because the men who run the world's money discover, one by one, that they need the quiet room more than they need to punish it. A bank that belongs to no one can be blamed by no one. And a bank that answers to none can be used by everyone. There is no trial. There is no reckoning. There is only rehabilitation. And from the shadow of that scandal, the tower does something masterful. It disappears. It stops trying to be a public institution and becomes something far more dangerous, an invisible one. The people who studied it closely will tell you the same thing. It didn't want headlines. It never did. What it wanted was to be the room where the decisions were already made before anyone else even knew a decision was being taken. And that, quietly, is exactly what it becomes. Because the world of money is about to come apart at the seams. It is the year 1971. In Washington, President Richard Nixon steps to a podium and severs the dollar's last link to gold, and the entire system the West was built on begins to shake. Currencies that were once anchored now float, swing, and collapse against one another. The 1970s become a decade of currency wars, nation against nation, printing press against printing press, the value of everything suddenly untethered and violent. And while trading floors scream and governments panic, the governors of the world's central banks do what they have always done. Every 2 months, they fly into one small Swiss city. They vanish behind the walls of a single tower, and they meet in secret to decide how to hold the shaking system together. And out of those secret meetings comes the machinery that governs your entire world. They are called the Basel Accords. Basel I, Basel II, Basel III. Think of them as the private rulebook the whole banking industry is forced to play by. The exact amount of capital every bank on earth must hold in reserve so that when the next storm comes, it does not simply vanish overnight. These are not laws passed by any Congress. They are not debated in any parliament. They are drafted, refined, and handed down from a committee inside a tower in Basel, and then every nation on the planet quietly bends its own banking system to obey them. Every bank you have ever used, every account you have ever held, obeys rules written in this one Swiss tower. And no one ever voted for a single word of them. This is the answer to the question the whole story has been circling. How does a bank that answers to no one become the bank that rules all central banks? Not with an army, not with a treasury, but by writing the rules that everyone else is forced to follow. Force is loud, and force can be resisted. A rulebook obeyed by every nation on earth is something far quieter and far harder to fight. You cannot vote it out. You cannot storm it. You can only comply. And so we arrive at the final test. It is the autumn of 2008. On Wall Street, Lehman Brothers collapses in a single catastrophic weekend, and the shock rips outward through every market on the planet. Banks that had stood for 100 years evaporate in days. Governments empty their treasuries to catch the falling pieces. Whole nations are pushed to the edge of ruin, and ordinary people lose their homes, their savings, their future, all at once. It is the greatest financial disaster since the crash that first built the tower. And through all of it, the tower does not shake. It does not shrink. It grows more central than ever. The place the shattered central banks turn to for the very rules meant to stop it from happening again. Ask which institutions were punished when the world nearly ended in 2008. The tower was not one of them. It never is. Its immunities remain untouched. Its minutes remain sealed. Its gold still moves in the dark, without a single politician watching. And here, at last, is the shape of the thing. Real power is never loud. It is not the president at the podium, or the banker on the magazine cover, or the crowd clawing at a locked door. Those are the storms. Real power is the quiet room the storms are never allowed to enter. The still paneled chamber where a handful of men settle the world's accounts while the world sleeps below them, answering to no government, searched by no police, condemned once and never once destroyed. It is the survival thesis, proven not by strength but by detachment. The BIS outlives every collapse for one simple reason. It belongs to no one. And what belongs to no one can be taken by no one. From the ruins of a war in 1930, when the victors first built it to squeeze a broken Germany, through the plundered gold it accepted while the world burned, through the death sentence the nations themselves handed down and could not carry out, through the currency wars, the death of the gold standard, and the great crash of 2008. The tower in Basel has outlived every empire that ever tried to command it. Kings fell. Currencies died. Whole orders of the world rose and crumbled into dust. And each time, when the smoke finally cleared, one quiet institution was still standing, exactly where it had always stood, above the storm and beyond the reach of the men who made it. The last one standing. Every single time. Basel. Phineas.